You know, there is a fine.
Double it.
I've got to pay mine.
Double it.
Yeah, okay, double it.
Pete and I were gonna start
And
and have the minutes reviewed, but you're here.
Somebody volunteered drinks on you, I'm not sure who it was.
Top shelf, right?
Yeah.
Nothing but top shelf.
That's exactly what I said.
That was everybody.
We got a light crowd.
Do we have a?
I don't know.
Seven. We have seven.
Okay.
Okay.
Now that somebody straggled in. What's that?
Do you want a sandwich? Slosky's, turkey, original, and.
Or original fry. So what do you got? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
No, 1, 2.
Oh, thank you.
And I've got some more. Maybe pass them out to you. All right.
The rest of us all put ours on silent.
Now let's go ahead and get the meeting started, and I apologize for running late. I have excuses, but no excuses are good, so I apologize. Hold you up. All right, why don't we start off? I see we got the mayor in the house, and I don't see any other council members, but Mr. Lynn, would you like to say anything before you started?
I would, thank you. I just wanted to come tonight because I believe this is your last meeting. And so to say thank you all for participating in this process. I was here the first night when you all started, and you all have given your time to be a part of this. And I purposely stayed away from coming to these meetings because I didn't want my presence to influence any decisions that were made in any form or fashion. And I can't speak for the other council members, but what you've done here is really, really important to the future of the city. And I hope that as you present your recommendations to the council, that they will evaluate this stuff seriously. Of course, anything that's done from here is got to be approved by the voters. And so I hope to be able to continue to pass along praise for the efforts that you all spent doing this. But I wanted to make just a quick statement on 3 things.
Chairman,
Excuse me.
excuse me, sir.
You have to wait to be recognized, okay?
So we'll have citizen comment. You can talk to citizen
But
comment.
he's not a member of the board.
He's a member of the city council, and they're entitled to at least and do some
He can make
stuff.
a statement, but not talk about substance.
Andy, would you like to show me the charter where he can't do it?
I'm sorry, what?
Would you like to show me the charter where he can't?
Well, he's not a member of the charter committee.
All right, thank you, thank you.
No, I'm just a chairman, that's it.
That's fine. Your objection is noted.
Okay, so I wanted to be very clear about 3 things that have been circulating from this committee. And, excuse me, I'm sorry, not from this committee, from people who have attended this committee meeting, Mr. Olivo being one of them. So first of all, I have never advocated that the mayor be a paid position. Contrary to information that's been circulating, that's something that's never come from my mouth. Okay, so I hope that you're listening, Mr. Olivo, as I'm addressing this. And I know the city secretary addressed this with you once before. Secondly, I have never advocated for a strong mayor position in this city. We have a city manager who is a trained professional, and his staff are trained professionals on how to manage the affairs of the city. And that's really important. That is not the job of the mayor. So I don't know how much consideration that was given, but it's never been something that I've advocated for. And then veto power was something else that was put out there. I've never advocated for the mayor to have veto power over the council. Never. No one person should be able to override the 5 council members that we have in this city. And I think that's really important. I certainly didn't run to do that, and I've never tried to do that. So I know that you all have not put forth these recommendations. These are coming from somebody else who sat here listening to your meetings, but decided to position a narrative contrary.
I'm going to ask you just to kind of address
Yeah.
us and
So-
avoid any further comments.
So thank you for doing what you did. Thank you for making the recommendations that you've made, and thank you for serving the city, because it is important. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. See any other distinguished? Yeah, so let's start now with the minutes. And so do we have any changes to the minutes? Anything that needs to be adjusted, corrected, or are we ready for a motion to approve the minutes?
Do we have a quorum?
Yeah, we have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
All right, don't see anybody with changes, so I'll take a motion to approve minutes.
I move.
All right, second. All right, have a second for Brenda. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, so there are several items that we still haven't addressed, some that we've been working on, but we need to wrap up. And then there are 2 items that we had talked about pursuing at this meeting. One was infrastructure for secure elections. Kevin, you were considering that. Is that something you want to continue on today?
Yes, I would, and we probably need,
Okay, very good. So we'll, what I want to do is kind of get into the ones we've already worked on, try to get those wrapped up, and then we'll get into that one. The other one was the citizen tax relief. That one I'll talk about for a little bit, not much. I think it's more something that we just should either individually or as a group make a recommendation to council, if anything. But I'll talk about that more when we get through what we have already before us and Kevin's item. So if we look at the packet we got, one of the issues, actually, I handed out kind of a running summary or a running total of what we've done so far. And if you look on this one under, I think where I stopped numbering, we have qualified voters to deal with, power to tax to deal with, and amendment affecting abstention voting. I believe those are the ones we still need to address.
David, can I interrupt for just a moment? I think there might be an error on your list.
Okay, what is that?
Number 2,
Yes.
I think
Oh, we approved
Oh,
that.
it was approved.
You're right, we did approve that.
And Karen gets extra points because she voted against.
Yes, I
That's
did.
right. So if there's, obviously this is not a final version by any point. This is something I put together today, and obviously I didn't proofread it well enough. So we did approve that one. Any other issues noted? All right. If you see them, just stop us and we'll make note on that. So let's focus then on qualified voters. I think in Pete's packet, there's some language, actually, let's see. What was in the council packet? We have
From Pete.
Probably looks like about 8 pages back. It's from Pete's office.
Next to last page.
Um,
706.
It's got, well, there's some more behind that, but it's quorum voting. Actually, you know what? I'm out of order again. Give me just a minute.
That's right. On 706 qualified voter, we approved it, but you wanted to add some other language, make sure that included other matters that may be presented to the voters by the city council. That was additional language.
That's right, that's Pete, right. The second to the last page, so we've got the language that to be added. It's for the mayor and for the council member, for the council district in which such person resides, and to determine the expenditures of money, assumption of debt, and for the levying of special taxes or other matters that may be presented to the voters by the city council. That last clause is what we talked about adding so that the city business would not grind to a halt because of the way the charter was written. So on that particular issue, qualified voter, do we have any discussion, or do we have a motion to approve the language as amended?
I move we have, well, is there any discussion, I guess we should. I move we approve the qualified voter description as amended.
Have a second?
I second.
Pat, thank you. All right, all in favor of the amended language for 7.06, say aye.
Well, hold your hands up.
All right, throw your hand up.
Let me go, this,
Only thing we added was that last phrase.
oh,
Okay, hands up on.
All right, all in favor? All right, looks like it's unanimous. So thank you for that. Thank you. All right, so moving on, I had a note, regulation of elections. We were just changing one reference, so just so there's no
Yeah,
question on 7.02, which is now 4 pages from the back, so we're kind of moving from the back to the front at the moment.
That's the one that had the incorrect reference that was being identified early on.
I think Kevin picked that one up, good job. So 7.02, all we did was change the reference to section 7.09 to 7.08. So well, let me ask for a show of hands. Those in favor of this change, raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes 7-0. Power to tax, which is under the 6th page from the back. I'm not sure that we discussed it, but we did not come to a final decision on the power to tax. That's under section 6.01. And
I think we came to consensus on a couple of the items.
I think we, 6.01, 6.02 we already approved, that was where taxes are payable. So 6.01, and I think what it is, we were waiting just for some new language to be presented to us, Pete, so everybody will take a minute to look at 6.01. If you have any questions or comments,
Where is
let me know.
Where are you seeing that?
Oh,
that? I see 603.
it's one,
I see 603.
601 is, they're in numerical order on my memo.
In the,
yeah, start from the back. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going
Yeah.
backwards.
come from the back.
Yes,
It's like the third page.
third or fourth page from the back.
No, third page from the beginning of the memo.
Oh,
It's
from the beginning of the
page,
memo.
it's page 3 of the memo.
Sorry, I didn't put page numbers on that. I did at the top.
Yeah.
We've got 2 different.
Oh, that's the one I was looking.
Hey, Pete,
Yes,
on that fourth line, provide, is that provide or should that be provided?
Beginning of the
Provide by ordinance? No, it provides by ordinance. Okay, nope.
Anybody have any issues with that? Or if not, I'll ask by show of hands, those in favor of approving 6.01 changes, please raise your right hand. All right, looks like it's unanimous.
we already did 602.
We did 602, so I'm really just hitting the ones that we didn't.
And then, I think that's all of those, because we already agreed on taking out 606 and 607, because it was already
Correct.
covered.
Okay, so
And 606 was cleanup, I think we did that. 608, which we'll have to renumber.
okay,
Become 606.
so towards the middle of the packet, there's another memo from Pete regarding quorum voting and property subject to tax. Quorum voting is really what we talked about on an abstention vote and how it would be handled. If everybody remembers, currently an abstention vote is a yes vote. And in our last meeting, it looked like we pretty much unanimously agreed that we wanted to change that it is not a yes vote and it is not a no vote, but we had to focus on to make sure we weren't creating bigger problems if we didn't address some other language. So Pete has presented us, top of the page, some language that,
Page 2,
page 2
page numbers are on the top.
so Pete, I've looked at this for clarity's sake. Here, it strikes out the language. It says it's an affirmative vote. So now there's nothing that says it's yes or no. Historically, people may look at it and say, hey, that's the way it's always been, and there's no specific change here. So I'm wondering whether we should go ahead and clearly state abstaining is neither an aye nor a no, to remove any doubt that our recommendation is if you abstain, you may be there
It's
for
a
a quorum.
no vote. I mean, it just doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, so I think it should be.
And I think that makes it clear to specify that it is a no vote.
So,
And I have a different approach. I think there should be a vote by everyone. They have to choose. A no vote is,
I don't think we can force somebody.
I know, but
to-
that's just how I
I
feel.
don't-
They're representing their community, their district,
But if
And
they
by
have a
not
conflict of
voting-
interest, right, I could.
well, if,
only in that case.
Let me-
But not
let me-
to just use it so you don't have to be on record as voting.
let me mention one thing. If we're going to put something back in there about abstention, then we'll have to say an abstention without a legal conflict shall not be counted as a vote in favor of, or something like that. So,
Why is it different? There's
because if you have a legal conflict, you're disqualified and you can't vote.
Okay, okay.
So if you have a legal conflict and you file an affidavit and you can't vote, can't participate in the discussion. But if we're going to put back language in there about abstention, something to the effect, any council member abstaining from the vote without a legal conflict shall be taken either as an affirmative nor a negative vote. Something like that.
I like that language. What I'd like to do is so that if we get through everything, we don't have to come back for another meeting, is if we need to take a short break in a minute, or when we get to a point, is put pen and paper and.
I'll email it to Aaron. Aaron can print it out.
We're gonna do that while we're talking.
Well, I want to wait and see if that language is okay.
All right, so everybody hear basically the language Pete had suggested?
And we're not causing bigger problems by doing that. I apologize, I wasn't here last week, so I'm just asking.
No, that's the whole reason we're looking at this, is to make sure that by changing this, we add enough additional language to avoid uncertainty or confusion or other problems. So, so back to the language that Pete suggested. Everybody hear that? Are they comfortable with that?
No objection to
Karen, what are your thoughts?
I still think there needs to be a vote. They have people they should represent. If they have a legal situation where they can't, that's one thing. But if they just don't want to take the stand, and then to me, that's not doing what you were voted in to do.
But then I think it's the constituents' job to vote them out if they're not voting.
And that's-
force it.
Right.
So that's just my personal belief. I want my council people to vote, not to abstain.
I think the only time I've ever seen any abstention is when there's a conflict of interest.
Now, there have been abstentions where, for one reason or another, somebody doesn't have a conflict and they abstain.
Okay.
So,
Or not want their vote on record either way,
right.
because you didn't vote against or in
So,
favor.
I don't know that we can constitutionally say you've got to say yes or no. So this way, it basically nullifies their vote, and they're gonna have to answer to their constituents. But let's do this, because I think it's pretty clear that the majority wants to look at it. Let's have Pete work on that language. When it's ready, we can come back and look at, revisit this one.
Otherwise, we have to set up a waterboarding room and all that stuff.
You have experience with that? Okay, all right, so we'll come back to the abstention issue. Peter, you comfortable working on that while we're talking?
Yep.
All right, so next on that same page, we had the discussion last meeting about the property subject to tax, and it's under 6.03. The proposed language was to delete the word tangible property.
We decided not to make any changes to it. Is that correct?
Oh,
Who decided?
Y'all decided.
we decided, okay.
Decided not to change that at all.
Okay, then I spent a few minutes reading all that and making notes and being prepared to discuss it. So, all right, so this one is previously approved.
What are we referring to?
Just
So-
underneath the quorum voting, the property subject to tax is what David was.
All real
So,
and tangible stay.
so what I understand, Pete, then is we're not going to present that for any changes.
Not that section.
Okay. All right.
It's all real. And
All right. I thought I was going to sound all smart looking at that.
Can you tell me where that located?
So if you, well, I mean, we're not changing anything, but it is under Pete's
Six.
first memo, it's section 6.03. I would say
It was 601 through 603.
6012, yeah. In this memo, it's just 6.03, which is the one that would have been primarily affected. So, all right. So,
It's page 1 of each memo.
Yeah, I didn't know I've read it.
It's actually page 13 of the packet from tonight.
correct.
Since I keep wandering around in here, you've already done this.
Making sure there aren't any other issues that you haven't addressed that I haven't mentioned earlier. All right. Let's move over to Kevin's issue, which is, Kevin, I'll go ahead and let you describe it, because I just call it, infrastructure for secure voting, but you may have much more substance to it than that.
No, that's fine, I appreciate that. If everybody remembers, we initially talked about, and this was my idea, but I didn't have exactly what it should encompass, but the thought was, is there an opportunity for us here at Farmers Branch to help ensure that we've got the best infrastructure in place to give us free and fair elections to the extent possible? We're not going to be able to prevent all issues with elections, but what at the charter level, is there an opportunity for us to help reinforce that? And as a result of that discussion, I asked
Kristen.
What's her name?
what's her name? Kristen Bickham, who has worked in the elections business here in Dallas, she and her husband, and a team since 2016, I believe, or maybe even before that. So she's got the most experience of the people that I know. And I posed the question to her. I said, if you had the opportunity at the charter level, if we could contemplate a couple of items, 2 or 3 items, that would help embed in our document that would provide a more secure opportunity for us, what would those things be? And Kristen thought about that for a week or so, and then came back and said, here's some ideas, and let me share some of my research with you. So basically, you guys are going to hear tonight what her research was for me in coming up with those couple of items. So David, Chair, if it's okay with you, I'd like to give Kristen the floor to talk for maybe 10 minutes on the background of the issue.
Sure. Kristen,
Okay.
where would you like to, where you come from standing?
You can sit right here. If you want.
Okay, I'll trade with Kevin.
So Kristen, can you share with us your background?
Sure. My name is Kristen Bickham, and our property address is 3746 Ridge Oak Way. And my husband and I have been Central County Watchers since November 2016. And so we've really tried to figure out how is Dallas County conducting our elections, and if or whether there's areas where the election code's not being followed. So I'm not an attorney, but in the course of pursuing the poll watching central count, we've come to learn certain election code sections that pertain directly to whether or not Dallas County voters have a reliable audit trail for election results. And so, to make a long story short, where there's consistent issues is either the lack of generation of a reliable audit trail or no generation at all of certain audit trail items. And that's the issue. So like, those are the consistent statutes that we believe are being violated by the election department. And so if Farmers Branch and this committee elected to do so, we drafted, Kevin and I, recommended language that's 3 paragraphs long, but could be placed in the election section of the city charter that would protect Farmers Branch voters. But it would also have the effect of protecting all Dallas County voters.
How would it do that?
Well, do you mind if I read just a little of
Please,
what I wrote? Okay. All right, so I'll skip the intro, but as many of you know, Dallas County's tabulation equipment is proprietary and opaque. The polling, and that's the tabulation equipment in central count. And then the polling location equipment is internet connected, and the Wi-Fi modems are left turned on at night. So that's a huge problem for creating a hacking risk. So then if you combine those two things, you've got the opacity of the central accumulator tabulation system and central count, and then the internet connectedness, it creates a cauldron of vulnerabilities. Okay, so the election code in chapter 122 requires that all voting systems that are certified for use in Texas be able to create an audit trail.
Now that's in the Texas, what?
In the Texas election code
Okay.
in chapter 122. So by law, our elections should be auditable and reliably auditable. But the problem is, like I just said, there are certain audit trail items that either aren't produced, aren't properly produced, or aren't consistently produced. So when you get to the end of an election cycle, and let's say you went and you did all these open record requests of the county, you couldn't obtain the records sufficient to actually audit the elections results and just do a citizen's audit. They're either unavailable or not properly generated.
Is that by design?
Well, I can't comment on other people's state of
Should
mind.
be
but-
either incompetence or by design. So which one do you guess it is?
Clear.
Well, these are very consistent problems.
Well, if
So-
the Texas election code says you have to be able to audit it, and you can't, then you're either incompetent or it's by design.
Yeah.
So which one do you get?
Well, if I had to guess, and it's only my opinion, it feels like it's on purpose.
Thank you.
But anyway, okay, so I think you all have the handout that Kevin gave you. Okay, so if you go to the back side of the document, which is the proposed charter amendment, it reads, we believe every eligible United States citizen should have the right to vote without their vote being diluted or manipulated. In order to better detect and prevent fraud in Farmers Branch elections, and in accordance with Texas Constitution Article 6 and Section 4, the city will appoint its own presiding judge in Central County, and that's in agreement with Texas Election Code Section 32.005 for each election. The city will additionally contractually require the Elections Department to pre-print and consecutively number its ballots in accordance with Article 6, Section 4 of the Texas Constitution and Texas Election Code Section 52.062. The pre-printed consecutively numbered packets of ballots delivered to the polls shall be in a consecutive range of uninterrupted numbers. So for example, if 1,000 ballots were delivered to Mansky Library for Election Day, they would be numbered 1 to 1,000, consecutive range. And then if the county refuses to contract with Farmers Branch in accordance with the foregoing requirements, notwithstanding the election administrator's duty to contract in Texas Election Code Section 31.093A, then Farmers Branch will revert to conducting its own Chapter 65.001 manual tabulations in accordance with Texas Election Code Section 123.001 for the protections of its citizens from potential fraud in unauditable and opaque tabulations, and in accordance with Article 1 and Article 2 of the Texas Bill of Rights, because those two Bill of Rights sections preserve our inalienable right to local self-government. So if we can't prove, for better or for worse, whether someone was properly elected, we can't have a Republican form of
Why
government.
vote?
Exactly. And I mean that with lowercase r, not capital R. Okay. And so just to give you an idea of the essentialness of consecutively numbered pre-printed ballots, imagine your checkbook. So if you had to submit your finances to an audit, the auditor would want, if you had written 100 checks, they want checks number 1 through 100. So if your checks were had randomly generated serial numbers on them, how possibly would your auditor know this is a legitimate check, but this one's not a legitimate check? It's impossible to know. So the number one way to protect against fraud in our current election system with digital voting equipment is consecutively numbered ballots, like by far and away. That's the number one audit trail item that Farmers Branch could use to protect its voters.
That doesn't exist now, I take it.
Yes, correct. Because in 2021, the election department started delivering blank ballots to the polling locations and used randomly generated serial numbers.
Wow.
In 2022, in November, they delivered packets of ballots that were consecutively pre-printed and numbered, but the range wasn't consecutive. So that gives opportunity to slip in some other numbers after the election's over. And also in November 2022, the election administrator decided to reuse ballots from November 2020, which is not provided for at all in the election code. You can't reuse ballots from a prior election because those are election records that you have to store by law for 22 months.
Let's get into what is going to correct it. I believe what you just said is, that's what I believed before, but you've been there. You
Yeah.
watched it. Okay, let's get into how you're gonna correct it. This is pretty good. This is the most
Okay.
important thing we're doing, I think, in this whole charter.
Yes, and it's where the city has its power and authority to actually
Yes.
do something.
Yes.
In Texas Election Code Section 32.005, the political authority or jurisdiction calling for an election has the authority to appoint its own presiding judge for Central County. Now, typically, what the county does is they pick one judge for the whole county and all the municipalities, and then the municipalities agree by contract to accept that judge. Farmers Branch doesn't have to accept that judge. Farmers Branch can separately agree that it will appoint its own judge, and therefore the voters of Farmers Branch have someone in there actually watching over tabulations.
Wow.
And that judge, even if the judge doesn't have the power to change what is going on in Central County, they can still report back to the city and say, hey, we got serious problems here. Hey, let's pull back to a hand count. So in other words, why not give the city its own representative in tabulations so you protect yourselves?
Brilliant.
Why not?
I can't think of any reason.
Okay,
So is there, I just want to make sure, if Farmers Branch did not want to agree with the other municipalities and say, we agree that Mr. Olivo is our election judge. We say, no, we want Clay over there, Clay Russell as our election judge. They cannot force us to have somebody we don't want.
correct. And that's Texas Election Code 32.005. And that's in your handout. All these sections I'm referencing are in your handout. So 32.005 gives the city the authority. And then it's just a question of negotiating, because it's Election Code Section 31.093 that creates a duty on the part of the election administrator to conduct the election according to the terms of the city. So the city can actually make contract changes.
Wow.
So where,
But hang on a second. The city cannot unilaterally make changes to a contract. So I hear all what you're saying, but I'm not sure what it has to do with the charter. But notwithstanding that, if the county doesn't want to do what we ask them to do, then they won't contract to do our elections. We can't force them to do that. We can't force an amendment to the contract. They have to agree. Contract requires mutual agreement on the part of the parties. So if we force something like that, the county has to agree to it. If they don't, then we have to find somebody else to conduct elections for us, or the city secretary has to conduct the elections.
Okay, so let me read section 31.093, duty to contract. Subject to section 41.001, if requested to do so by a political subdivision, the county election administrator shall enter into a contract to furnish the election services requested in accordance with a cost schedule agreed on by the contracting parties. So the word shall doesn't leave wiggle room
well,
for the election.
But the agreed on,
yeah, there are outs in there. as Jeannie was saying, the agreed upon contracting or the cost. They can simply throw out a number that we would never be able to cover. So they've got outs, and I would suspect that they'd say, if we came up with some terms that were wild, we couldn't force them into a contract, and no court would require them to accept a contract that we present unilaterally. So the shall is, I'm not, that's one of the times a shall would probably not be interpreted as a shall if we overstepped.
Do you think it's unreasonable to ask for Farmers Branch to have its own judge?
I don't think it's unreasonable to have your own judge. That part I think is eminently reasonable. Whether they agree to it or not is another story.
Historically, what's happened in the past? Has anybody else done this?
No, historically, this other cities in Dallas agree to the judge. But in our experience, if the county is not producing a reliable audit trail, then it behooves the city to have their own judge in there, if for no other reason to be a witness, see what's going on and be able to report back to the city, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. And I think it's very reasonable to ask for the county to accept the city's judge appointment. I think it's eminently reasonable.
What would be the cost
Or an election period, or?
for us to have our own judge?
Well, the judge is $18 an hour, and it's, I don't know,
We
probably,
pay a certain fee anyway, right?
right.
Okay,
It'd
so
be-
we-
it'd be
if we had to do
embedded.
it ourselves, what would be the additional cost?
So we would, if we had to do it ourselves, there'd be a whole lot of issues. We, number one, we'd have to create the ballots, we'd have to print the ballots, we'd have to make sure that they're all right.
They have to get the
We'd
machine.
have to get the machines, or we'd do it by hand, so then we'd have to hire the people to do it. I'm not trying to be negative with that, we don't want to enter any about
Oh, but that's the
negativity.
cost, so is it worth the cost?
Well, there are other issues I can see without,
Okay.
jumping too deep is, our elections, unless we were, and I suspect by state law, we can't vary on the election dates, we're gonna have to do it in May or November. We're gonna be running right up against all the other elections, the county elections and school elections. They're all gonna have their locations picked out, and so if we can't somehow piggyback off their locations, then we gotta have our own location, and now our voters
Have to
We're
go
gonna
two
have to
places to vote.
vote places. I mean, I want to figure out how to make our elections, more secure. We have to do it in a way that we actually can
Yeah, I agree.
be
I mean,
effective.
I mean, it does seem like it's an obvious problem if they're not pre-numbering the ballots.
Well,
That's what Chris-
so why did they go, and I think I know the answer to this, but why did they go to the randomly numbered ballots?
What do you think they do?
Are they?
Well, and so think when you sign in and they tell you to pick any ballot.
Bless you.
I think it's about anonymity on the vote and not having anything pre-recorded on the ballot that you're taking. So I think there were some things that they actually were addressing by doing the random numbering. So, hey, I'm an accountant. I'm totally with you
Yeah, yeah.
on the sequential number series, but I just have to question
Well,
why
when
they did
the,
it in the first place.
When the ballots are, they call it disarranging. So when they do that, it's presupposing that they're consecutively numbered. And so that you pick a number that's in that group where no one knows that number except you. So that's why they disarrange. If they're blank ballots with randomly generated serial numbers, there's no need to disarrange because the number's randomly generated.
Does Dallas use the random serial numbers?
They did in 2021, and the problem is the Secretary of State put out an election advisory that's 2019-23, and it says that counties can pick to either consecutively number or randomly generate serial numbers. The problem is there's no provision in the election code for the random generation of serial numbers. There's only a provision for consecutively numbered ballots.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's a waiver.
So would the Attorney General of Texas have a word to say about this?
I would hope.
So who did you say granted the waiver?
Secretary of State.
Yeah. I did, I think we've got I don't know, I don't think it's an issue to put in the charter. It's an issue that I think we all feel near and dear about, but we need to figure out the effective way to approach council about doing something that's effective on this front.
So that's not part of what the Charter Committee should do? Or could do, or I'm kind of confused.
I mean, the council already has the ability to try to enforce the rules. I'd be a little, maybe I wouldn't be, I am, I guess, a little surprised that if they were not, if they're doing something that was made it easy to game the system, that some city or some group of citizens would seek an action to challenge the election or preemptively force them to follow the proper rules.
You don't need any of this language to do these things. You know, the city has that ability right now. You know, they go to contract with the county, and Stacy can share some of it. We did ask them to do certain things, and they indicated they wouldn't do it. And as I indicated, so if they're not willing to do it, notwithstanding what you think that section says, we can't mandate the county elections enter into contract that they're not agreed to do those things. But you don't need this in order for the council or the city to take those actions. The city can always decide that they can do their own elections.
When, as technology changes, if it's in the charter, then we have to follow it for 5 years until the next charter review.
State law.
Things may be improving, so it wouldn't be a city charter, it would be like you were saying, handled differently.
Yeah, state law will always trump. So even if you put that in there, saying the county doesn't do it, then we have to do our own elections. Well, then if state law changes somehow, the state law will trump that, will supersede that.
So
What I'm saying is you don't need any of this to do those things that they're suggesting. Okay? And that should be something the council will decide whether or not they want to have their own elections or to continue to work with the county to get them to change their process.
Kevin has a comment.
So up until this last election, our council didn't even know this was a risk.
Neither did I mean, I had no clue.
So we're talking about a council that doesn't know what they don't know as it relates to election law. Not because they're, not capable of it. They're unaware of the issues and the fraud that potentially can exist and does exist. So it was under the efforts of this group that actually brought it to the council last year to begin that discussion about there is a risk and here's where those risks are located. And we need to consider those things. I personally believe that this is the appropriate place to embed the values of the people to say this is our will. And we have to remember too, it may leave us here as a recommendation, but the council still has to discuss it and decide whether that's something they want.
Vote on it, right?
And voters have to vote on it.
It is,
Yes, that's correct.
it can be a recommendation that they address it in one form or another.
Well, let's take a little vote and see if there's enough of us to agree with Kevin.
Well, hang on there, because it depends on what you're asking. Is it just an idea? Because there's like this proposed amendment. I mean, you wouldn't want to use this because you're citing to specific sections could change at any point in time. And now you got us locked into, we gotta go do this, except that now the law's this. So if we even did an amendment, we decided we wanted to propose an amendment, as opposed to go to the council and recommend that they pursue it through one other vehicle or another, we have to have it in a way that will withstand legislative change,
Yes,
constitutional
I agree.
change. So,
I agree, so-
I applaud this effort because it's something that, as you say, council didn't know about it. Probably 98% of the average, voting qualified voter has no clue about what the requirements are and how easy or potentially easy it is to gain. So it's it's a education process that is lacking, or a lack of voters really wanting to have an inquiring mind about it, because they're busy in their everyday lives. And
So how do we just get it in a simple form to say the city council should address this issue?
wow.
Well, that is possible. In essence, what we're saying is, in a perfect world, we'd go back to where we'd all meet down at the Civic Center and vote, and by the end of the evening, we'd have hand counting, and we'd know who the winners are. We'd have some barbecue and some iced tea, and we'd go home. That's in a perfect world. If we have to tolerate digital voting equipment, which is at minimum suspect today, if we have,
Wi-Fi is, the modems are on all night.
yeah, if we have to tolerate that for a period of time as we improve the system over time, these are a couple of safeguards we can implement that allow us to help the voters of Farmers Branch feel comfortable in coming away from an election feeling trustworthy.
Okay, so how do we get some wording to put it into this charter? How do we simplify this to get a vote on it tonight?
Well, the first item there is having an election judge there. Basically, the simplest way to say that is we want to have somebody in the room that represents the voters of Farmers Branch. The only reason we know there's issues and we're able to come up with these bullet items is because we've been in a number of elections representing citizens that want better trust in our voting. And we saw the
Who
issues
wouldn't
that
want
existed.
that? I mean, I'm kind of curious, who wouldn't want that?
They shouldn't.
Okay,
And the fact that we're talking about a potential for embedding it in the Constitution of Farmers Branch, to some extent is a little bit sad. But we are where we are today.
okay, so how do we get something on the, what do you call it, a proposal to get a vote on this thing, to simplify the wording, to get the city council to even consider this? Because there's objections raised, and I can see the legal objections, so we need to do something based on Kristen's expertise here to simplify it, to get a vote on this tonight.
It may be that we don't have the language to present to council, but we state that we have a recommendation that they try to craft the language that they could put in the charter. It's gonna have to, I would think if we did that, whatever the outcome is, it's gonna have to be a very generic
Yes,
provision in the charter,
Yes.
something along the lines of, to the extent permitted by state law, the city will always have its own election judge present during all city-related elections. And perhaps something, and the city will always endeavor to require the voting authority to adhere to all state laws regarding
Texas
ballot
electoral code to be able to audit the
Beautiful,
vote.
that's perfect.
Yeah,
So,
okay, let's do that.
so, but I think that the better approach would be to tell council or tell the council, we recommend that they work on some kind of language to address having an election judge there. It could easily be done by ordinance as opposed to a charter
Okay,
vote. Same thing with enforcement of laws and definitely the enforcement of the election code and the rules.
Okay.
That can be done by ordinance, so it'd give them a basis for diving deeper into this. And the sooner we make our presentation to the council, the better. I mean, if we wrap up, do we have to wait till the currently scheduled presentation date, or could it be moved up so they have more time to deal with it?
let's do that.
Stacy?
I'd recommend changing the charter at a minimum to get a presiding judge and central count for Farmers Branch. Because if we don't do it that way, then we, as citizens, we have to keep going back to the city council every election to get an ordinance to do it. So if we change the charter, it's one and done. But if it's by ordinance, we have to go back each time.
No, I
And,
mean,
and we're not changing the charter, we're making recommendations.
Yeah.
Well,
Making
okay,
recommendations.
understood.
But what you said is not accurate. If an ordinance, unless it has a sunset provision, will continue on for election after election after election. So you don't
Okay,
you don't
okay, I
you don't have to
understand.
memorialize it in the charter if you've got an election or an ordinance that doesn't have a sunset provision.
Okay,
So I think this is an important issue, but I'm wondering if we look at the ordinance as opposed to putting it in the charter. And the reason being that I think Mr. Olivo had a point in the letter that he sent. If we have too many things that we're going to be presenting to council that then potentially will go to the citizens, we're going to get fatigued on their part as far as all the things we're asking them to vote on. So I think there's such a thing as survey fatigue, and I think that's what we're going to be hitting up against. So I think if we can do it by ordinance as opposed to the charter, then that's the way to go.
Well, let's poll everyone and see what we're gonna do.
Well, I mean, I can pretty much tell from the consensus that everybody would like to get the council to address it in one form or the other. I don't know that we really need, I mean, I can do this. Do we want to vote on whether it's by ordinance or by charter, or leave it open to the council's discretion?
Well,
So-
Kevin brought it up, so maybe Kevin, what is your recommendation?
So my recommendation, and the feedback in the room has been very good. I think it's a great idea. I think simplifying the language is a good thing. We could potentially even do that tonight because we're not talking about rocket science. We're talking about, we'd like a representative in the room. We'd like a presiding judge there representing the interests of Farmers Branch. That's generic language that doesn't specify code. The second thing is we demand, as Farmers Branch voters, that at a minimum, we get sequentially numbered ballots that are auditable.
So again, we'd have to, I'm not sure how we would do that, because if the law changes, let's say the Secretary of State, whatever waiver he gave becomes the next law, that they don't have to have sequential ballots, and we've just tanked that charter review provision. It's now completely meaningless. So that's at least 5 years before we get back to doing something, and then you got to question whether your next charter review committee would take this issue up. I'd like to think they would, but you never know. So I think you can be more proactive and reactive if it's ordinance driven rather than charter driven.
And Kristen, could Kristen do a presentation to city council? I mean, this sounds like a brand new issue that they have really not been educated by somebody who's actually, had boots on the ground there.
There is nothing that prevents them from doing it. The question would be, what's the most effective way to get traction and get some movement on the issue? I certainly would think that if it's, if the council meeting has adequate time, try to sequence it at the same time we make our presentations, our recommendations to council, and it's, the table gets set by our presentation, and you guys come in and you make your presentation and some kind of recommendation or offer that, hey, if you would form a committee, we'd like to chair the committee or be some of the members of the committee to look into this a little deeper, or we can even come back with some proposed ordinance language, but you've got a lot of options there.
And those of us who have relationships or don't have a relationship with our council people, you can all talk to your representative and kind of let them know your feelings. So when they do have the gathering, the people have already spoken.
Yeah, what I don't want to do though is tie us into something where we put it in the charter and then laws change and we're dead in the water. I'd rather have us in a position where we can adjust to that very quickly with a new ordinance or revised ordinance.
So Kevin mentioned two things. One is to have its own presiding judge, and the other is to have ballots that are in order. If we just put in the presiding judge, I think we should at least vote on whether we should have that part in the charter. Because that doesn't seem like there's any,
So the presiding, having a presiding judge right now is allowable. But if the legislature changes that in the next session, or they, God forbid, they have a special session to deal with the election issues, I don't think, I mean, I say God forbid, I don't think they'd ever do that. But if they did, it'd be a good thing for us and this issue. But
Theoretically, they could do that to any one of our charter items, right?
most of our charter items are set up to be consistent with the state law. So I suppose, I don't know a specific item in the charter that a legislative change would wipe out right away, unless they said, okay, we're no longer going to have, these home rule cities can no longer have city councilmen. They have to have aldermen, and they have to be 18 years old or younger. I mean, I'm coming up with a ridiculous suggestion or example, but yeah, so then they could do something like that, but I don't know of a practical provision in the charter that they would undo. Because it really, is there something in our charter that is outside the bounds of what state has already addressed? Probably not much in there. There's some stuff in there that we probably, where the state leaves some holes that we may be beyond what they someday change or restrict, but right now I can't come up with an example.
So my thought at the basic level is the fact that we're asking for representation in the room, and we want an auditable audit trail, are two very simple things. And I think as a value system, conveying that in the charter makes sense.
Can I add a few things
Yes,
just in
please.
my dealings with Dallas County? As part of our contract, they provide basically nominations. They provide nominations for central count judges. They have some as part of the contract as entities taking part in that contract. We have about, usually I think it's 8 nominations that we vote for as our representative for central count judge. And that's how they bring that forward to the cities and school districts that are participating. And then we vote on who we would like as our central count judge and put our nominations in. So that's one part of the process that occurs right now. We can certainly have a presence. I was there on our special election back in January of last year. I was a central count judge during that election and was in the room then. So we certainly have the availability to be in the room as well, but we do nominate as part of that contract a central count judge. And then as far as sequential ballots, no, we don't get 1 through 1,000. They do use sequential numbering ballots, 1 through 100,000 or whatever it may be, but no, each entity or participating is not getting 1 through 1,000.
No, and I wasn't recommending that.
Yeah.
I meant for, if it was the whole county, be like 1 through 2 million.
Right.
But point being, each number is unique and they're all consecutive.
Right, because Jean may, go vote in Farmers Branch, but you may be in Dallas and decide to go vote at a vote center. When you use the vote centers, that's where those ballot numbers are.
Could we have the Dallas County electoral judge, I guess he's called, is that what he's called?
Presiding judge.
Presiding judge, can we, in the charter, request that he make a presentation or come to visit the city council and explain?
Can't force
We can
a
request.
You can request, okay. So this is, okay.
Stacy, what you said that we get to nominate. So the way the contract is presented to us, I just want to understand how it works, because we always can look at the contract and make proposed changes and send it back to them and see if they accept it. I'm gonna bet, you're asking me to be a betting man, $1 to a donut, they're likely to say no to most, if not all, of the proposed changes. So if we,
Sure,
If
and
we
we
said-
did that last year, we talked about these issues before, and we did present that to Dallas County.
And the response was?
They did not change the contract.
so what changes did we propose?
We proposed the election judge and the sequential ballots.
Okay, so, and they rejected both of them.
Correct.
We wanted to have our
They
own
cited
election.
the election, waiver you were discussing earlier as part of that as well.
Okay, so so it leaves us dead in the water. We take their contract, or we're having to do our own election and face all the problems, or some of the issues we talked about, and there's probably others that we didn't.
So the third paragraph says, if the county refuses to contract with Farmers Branch in accordance with the foregoing requirements, then Farmers Branch will revert to conducting its own Chapter 65.00 manual tabulation elections in accordance, et cetera. So we could do that.
Well, yeah, we can do it. The question is, legally we can do it. Can we effectively do it? Can we,
Cost
again,
effectively do it.
it's cost effective. Manually doing it, you run into problems of now, as I said earlier, our city election is not going to be at necessarily the same location, and everybody that goes to vote, they want to vote in the city, the county, and the school are going to have to vote in two different places and do two different votes. That is a recipe for probably a whole lot of voters just saying, I'm going to do one or the other and not both. There's going to be a bunch of us that'll say, I'm going to vote no matter what. If there's broken glass, I'm crawling across it. But there's a whole lot of voter apathy. We don't need to add reasons for people not to vote. Again, this is a worthy issue, but we got to figure out how to make it a viable fight, not something where we just end up becoming an example of what not to do because we get burned at the stake. And so I don't want to. I want to do something, but I don't want to do it in the wrong way. I want to do it the way that has potential to be effective, and I don't know what it is tonight. Kevin.
My thought is I'd like to put it to the floor that we send simple language, 2 items to the city council. We're not a body that has to work out the details, but I think we do represent the will of the people. And let's put it in front of council, and then they can decide to jettison it if it doesn't make any sense at all.
Okay.
But I would like to take it to the floor tonight.
Okay. What? Just so we're all clear, what are the 2 simple concepts or provisions we put forward? Because I want to.
The first one is Farmers Branch voters want to have a presiding judge in the room at the election. Representation. The second item is we demand that we have sequentially numbered ballots that are auditable.
Okay.
And that's a fairly simple request on 2 fronts.
So if the city or the county says, no, we're not doing it, then what kind of a problem does that go back and create within our charter? If we say, we want this, and the county says no, then is the city of Farmers Branch obligated to put up a fight for it because it's in their charter?
In other words, are we all required to sue the city to make them, or the county to make them do what we want to do?
Well, or to try to make them. It's kind of like David and Goliath here, but does it create an environment where the city of Farmers Branch is now legally obligated to put up a big fuss to try to get it, knowing they're not going to get it? It's in the charter, so now they have to fight for it.
So.
But you don't have to have this in the charter.
Right, no, that's
Right.
right, but that's
So
what
it-
Kevin's asking.
Yeah,
Well, if you say that, if you put in the charter that they've got to be appoint your own judges, got sequential ballots, and if they won't do it, then you have to hold your own elections. And if that's the third thing that he's recommending, then that forces the council to hold their own elections.
Right, that's what I was trying to get to.
And so I don't know that you want to do that in the charter. I don't think the council will want to do that either, because,
well, they will reject it if they don't want to do it. Right?
well, but if you have in the charter says that you gotta have your judges and sequential ballots. And if the county won't do that, whoever your contractor won't do it, then the city has to have its own election. You're forcing the council to have their own elections, which means the city's gonna have
We're
to.
not, all we're doing.
Hey, no, hang on a second. If that's what his proposition is for you to consider, what that does is forces the council to conduct their own elections, because if the county refuses, then the city's forced to do their own election, which means all that expense, and we don't have the machines and so forth and so
But
on.
all we're doing is making a recommendation, right?
Well, he wants to put before you a proposal to amend the charter.
I know, but the city council's gonna vote on that.
Right, but
Yeah. All right,
Is that
so-
right?
Well,
if they want to, but I want to make sure you understand, assuming the three prongs are correctly described, is that right?
They're not correctly described. What we're saying is, here's what we're asking for, these two items. If we don't get those two items, we may choose, we have other options. We may choose to do our own election.
Okay.
But whatever we do goes to the city council, they can say yes or no.
Correct.
Right.
so there's potentially three items that Kevin is talking about. It doesn't have to go, I mean, if we're gonna consider them as to whether this body recommend them to council, it doesn't have to be an all or none. So I'm gonna suggest that we discuss each one separately, because I think there's some are more problematic than others.
Yeah.
So,
It's good.
So Kevin, the first one is that the city, we put something in the charter that the city appoints its own election judge to observe the election.
To represent Farmers Branch in the election.
Which effectively means they're going to be at the election site overseeing, or at least watching what's going on.
That's correct.
So, right, so that's item one, so
Can I
let's.
ask for clarification? Are you talking about like at the Mansky Library, or are you talking about at Central County?
Central County.
So, does everybody understand what we're talking about now? So, Farmers Branch will endeavor to have its own election official at Central County on election day,
Election judge.
election judge. So,
Just on election day.
No, through all tabulations,
For each
4 or
election.
5 days.
for each election. All right, so just trying to make sure there's not any traps in that, just in terms of what we're doing. All right, so is there any discussion about topic one or item one?
And you're suggesting that this goes into the charter?
So item one would be a recommendation. Does this board want to recommend to council that there's a charter amendment effectively stating that Farmers Branch will appoint its own election judge to participate through any city election at Central County?
Let's vote.
Any discussion? Anybody want to have any other discussion? All right.
So are we ignoring the fact that we've asked for that and they've refused?
Well, I mean, that's part of the discussion we've had is, I mean, everybody's voting on this based on the discussion. So if there's any other specific issues, if you want to readdress the benefits or the problems, let's do it before we vote. If not,
So David, can we send a recommendation from this committee to council, but not have it in the charter?
Yeah.
But we take it to them and say, we've talked about this is a very important issue. We're not going to put it in the charter, but we want you all to start thinking about this. and-
yeah, absolutely. We can do that tomorrow. We can do it when we make this presentation. We can do it any time.
So I
we
think it
can do
still
it.
carries the weight of this committee without having it be a charter change.
Right. So, so if any one of these issues, this group doesn't want to do it as a charter review recommendation, we can make the next vote is we make it as a recommendation to the council that they either pursue an ordinance or some other vehicle by which to do this. So that makes sense to everybody?
And if that's the way I feel, I would have proposed it as such, and I wouldn't be here with this item on the agenda.
I understand, but there's a full board and everyone needs to make the decision based on how they interpret it. So, and I'm not trying to say that it's not important, but everybody's kind of gonna make their own judgment call. So, all right, item number 1 is what I just stated. Those in favor of making this as a recommendation to the council as a charter change, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now let's take that same one and say, does this board want to make a recommendation to council that they address this issue either by ordinance or some other legal vehicle so that it's addressed and we present it to them either as a board or make the proposal and then let the group that has all the details and has worked hard on it follow us up at some point in time. So those in favor of that approach, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like unanimous. So we will approach this as a recommendation for the council to handle, but just not as a charter review issue or charter issue. All right. Item number 2 is to put before council the proposed charter amendment to require the county, that we require the county to use sequential ballots, sequential numbering on the ballots. I say that more or less accurate.
Yes, sequentially numbered and
Auditable.
And deliver consecutively numbered packets.
yes.
And that's required by the Texas Electoral Code?
Yeah, it's section 52.06.
However, it's not being adhered to.
Okay, but it is in the code.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So we should just say, as the Texas Electoral Code states?
That's the way it exists today, and it's not being, so this is an opportunity for the will of the Farmers Branch
Okay,
people
okay.
to say you're ignoring this and you're waiving these opportunities, and we don't want any.
Okay.
Do you have any information on why the Secretary of State provided the waiver and what basis he used or what law he was relying on?
Mhm.
Okay.
We don't know what those backroom conversations were.
And then to your knowledge, nobody has filed suit to challenge the waiver. All right. So we're going to handle it the same way as the first vote is first we'll decide whether we present this to council as a proposed charter amendment. If that doesn't pass, then we'll vote on whether to make it a recommendation to council that they pursue this through another vehicle. So, all right, so let's start off with a vote on those in favor of it being proposed to council as a charter amendment related to the sequential numbering and delivery of the packets. Raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then those in favor of it being presented to council as a recommendation to pursue through another vehicle, all in favor? All right, unanimous again. All right, and then the third version of it, you want to present that or you, I'm sorry, why don't you state it one more time so I get it right?
I don't know that there's any need for the third,
Okay.
based on the way.
Do you want to propose the third as the alternative that we make the recommendation to council?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll let you state what the third one is and then I'll call for the vote.
Well, let's see, what did we say? What were the words we were using?
Hand count as an alternative to the election system.
Yes, if the city of Farmers Branch does not feel that we can get an auditable audit trail, we reserve the right and may choose to do our own hand count, paper ballot election.
And that is being presented to this board as a recommendation to council to use as an alternate vehicle, not as a charter amendment. Correct. So, all right, so those in favor of this being an alternate method to, recommend to the council, they pursue an alternative method of pursuing a hand count if they so choose based on how the county responds to our request. Those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? All right, so that one does not pass. All right, so we're going to make a recommendation, 2 recommendations to council. They pursue alternative methods for the have an election judge available, and the second one, sequential balloting and delivery of the ballots to the city. So, all right.
So I have a question. So going back to something Kevin said earlier about our values. And is there an opportunity to put something in the charter that just doesn't get down to the micro level that some of these conversations have been, but still we can put something into the charter that states our values as far as, fair and, whatever, auditable, whatever language we want to use, that sort of puts council on notice that this is something that they need to pay attention to, even though we didn't micromanage to that level.
I mean, it could be in our presentation to council. We certainly could include that as, look, we also talked and spent a lot of time on the third issue. And while it's not a recommendation, we want to make sure you're aware.
Well, I'm talking about the whole thing.
The whole thing.
I mean, just getting back to as citizens of Farmers Branch, what's important to us as far as the elections? And is there some language that we might think about for the charter that then gets into touching some of these issues? And I don't have the language right now. I'd have to go back and rethink it. But touching some of these issues without getting down to the micro level.
The answer to your question is yes, and I'll throw out something and see if this is what you're thinking. We believe every eligible U.S. citizen should have the right to vote without the vote being diluted, manipulated, and for it to be fully auditable.
Okay, I think that's sort of what I'm thinking, but I would flip it to be a little bit more positive rather than saying what we don't want, but what we do want.
Okay.
So anything like that is probably likely to be just more, hey, this is our preamble to our Constitution, our charter, because it's not addressing anything, it's not requiring anything to be done, it's not restricting anything, it's more of a preamble. Do we have a preamble to our charter?
No, it's not.
So-
It's, the philosophical language is
Yeah.
not in here. It's very tactical.
Yeah, so.
There's a little bit in section 7, in the first paragraph or 2, that addresses fraud.
It does. It's 702.
Yeah.
And it says the council shall make all regulations which it considers needful or desirable, not inconsistent with the charter, laws of the state of Texas for the conduct of municipal elections, for the prevention of fraud in such elections, and for the recount of ballots in the case of doubt or fraud. So there's some in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we may be just attacking something that's already in there.
It's in there, it's not, probably not as, number one is, nobody reads the charter other than about 15 people in here and maybe
Once every
15
5 years.
15 other people around the city, unless there's a specific reason.
Once every 5 years.
Once every 5 years. So, I mean, the city can do a resolution with almost that identical language. It has as much effect as putting it in the charter. The resolution, maybe the charter has a little more airplay because it's during election. The resolution's gonna get out on the city council meeting. It's gonna be in the minutes. And so people that watch the council meeting are going to hear and see this and understand, or maybe they don't understand the gravity of the situation, but the resolution at least gets it out there, now, leading up to an election, and if it's done timely, there's nothing that says they can't kind of make it an annual resolution, where it gets out there each time, but.
I will say a resolution was done last year to Dallas County discussing many of these issues.
Yeah. Was it?
Yes.
So we could recommend that they re-up the resolution and submit it again.
There's 30 entities that participate in 30
There
some.
was 38 last.
Yeah,
So,
and so I think that we might have a louder voice if there was an organized subset of that 38 as opposed to.
right, you guys have reached out to some other cities about this or not?
We have, so, yes.
Are you,
And across the state as well.
are you getting any traction in the Metroplex?
We've not spent much time on the Metroplex.
Okay.
Farmers Branch has been the initial kind of test bed for that opportunity.
Okay.
Gillespie County is doing a hand count for their Republican primary. And that resolution passed, so they're actually working on that and they're gonna make that happen for March.
Which county again?
Gillespie,
Gillespie.
And there are conversations going on right now and plans being developed for a potential hand count paper ballot for the GOP primary in the spring for Dallas County.
And the GOP primary would still be run by, right now, by the county? Or would it be, y'all be looking to another entity to run it?
The county is just one vendor.
One vendor, okay. Are there other vendors out there that are actively running elections? Private entities?
Third party's not doing it as a business, but it potentially would be. We've had offers from other counties that they'd be willing to handle elections for smaller counties other than Dallas County.
Gotcha.
Dallas County's huge. Gillespie County's 27,000 people, which is less than the population of Farmers
Gillespie is
Branch.
Fredericksburg,
Yes.
basically.
Yes,
So great place to visit.
and evidently to vote.
It is.
You know, we counted.
It is a deep red county. Okay, so I'd like you guys to be prepared to, present after we do. And depending on how prepared you are, if you do that, then we can focus a little more on this particular area in our presentation. Kind of set the table for you guys to come in and make the hard sell.
okay.
So,
Good. We'll be ready.
all right. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
I know there's a
Thank you.
boatload of work that you guys
Thank
put
you.
into
Thank
it.
you.
so,
Thank you.
And
Um,
appreciate all the research.
Oh, sure, our pleasure.
All right, Pete, you were working on some language. Do we?
It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
right
been
here.
passed out.
It's right here.
All right, so we have now been presented with the new proposed language for section 2.14, quorum voting. And it adds the language, any council member abstaining from voting except when disqualified shall not be taken as an affirmative or negative vote. So do we have, that satisfies my concern. It makes it crystal clear. I had asked Pete while he was working on this, does this open the door for some confusion that now the mayor or someone gets to vote on everything and this section is not, but it's crystal clear in two other locations in the charter, 2.05 and 2.07. The mayor still only votes in case of ties or in connection with, I believe, voting what to do with the city manager as well as the city municipal judge perhaps. So the mayor still is not a terribly active mayor unless somebody decides to abstain and there's a tie. So
Pete's wording is great.
I like what you did, Pete.
Okay.
Great.
So, you can go home
Okay,
now.
great.
All right, so, all those in favor of the language that Pete has amended for 2.14, by show of hands, all in favor?
What, I'm reading for others.
Okay, sorry, anybody else need?
And I do have a question, except for disqualified, what does that add to that sentence?
That's making it clear that if you are,
You have a legal conflict.
You're already taken out of, you're disqualified from voting entirely.
I think
So if you're not voting, then the abstention doesn't apply to you. So why do we have disqualified in here?
because it's recognizing that there are legal bases for abstaining from vote, and
So if you're disqualified, you would not be voting, period.
you would not be.
You don't have a
yeah,
vote in.
not
So
voting.
there's no need for except when disqualified in here. It's not additive at all.
He comes from abstaining. I suppose that's right.
Well, it's clarifying it. I mean, the current language is any council member abstaining from voting except when disqualified shall be taken as an affirmative vote. So all you're changing is saying that if they abstain, they're not disqualified, their abstention is not either a yes or no.
Well, does that open up the door for ambiguity?
Yes.
Any council member abstaining, hang on, let me.
Okay.
Any council member abstaining from voting except when disqualified shall not be taken as an affirmative or negative vote. So if I'm playing devil's advocate, except when disqualified, so if Omar is disqualified because he's got a conflict of interest, somebody could argue that means, well, his vote still counts as an affirmative.
Because if you're disqualified, you can't vote.
Then we
He
don't
cannot,
really
he
need it
cannot
in there.
vote, okay.
Well, I think it kind of clarifies. If you have a disqualification, it's different than if you just don't vote.
Right.
You have a legal, I can't vote, not because I chose not to vote. And I think when you abstain, that's a choice to not vote.
So for example, a couple of weeks we had council member abstain, did not have a legal conflict. And so it was recorded as a yes vote. So you want to make it, you wanted to get away from the idea that abstention when not disqualified was a yes vote. So we took it out. You didn't like that. So then you said, well, what about if they abstain? What do? We need to clarify. So the only way to clarify that is to say it's neither a yes or no.
Yeah, and that's not my issue. I'm suggesting that the three words except when disqualified are not additive to the sentence and it complicates the.
Because a council member can abstain if they have a legal conflict. If you don't have that in there, that means that the person disqualified is a neither yes or no.
If they're disqualified, there's no abstention issue.
They're not voting, I guess, right?
You're not
Is,
supposed to, you're correct.
is there another section that deals with the disqualified council member not voting?
State statute, chapter 171, local government code, and the code of ethics.
I'll take that as a yes,
Yes.
just not in our charter. All right, any council member abstaining from voting except when disqualified shall not be
I
taken.
mean, if you want to take out except when disqualified, I think it's legally precise and correct. But if you want to take it out and just say, council member abstaining from voting shall not be taken as an affirmative or negative vote, I don't really care.
I think, yeah.
Doesn't make any
I
difference.
think we take it out, just because I could see some potential for somebody arguing
Yes.
that a disqualified council member now gets to vote even if there's another state. And
Okay.
we'd have to stop everything to go do the research, or we'd have a vote give challenge. So with the removal of the except when disqualified, the language that we've just been presented to us, do we have any more discussion? If not, we're going to put it up for a vote. So we're voting on whether to approve or not. This is a charter amendment as presented, except we're removing the 3 words except when disqualified. Those in favor, raise your right hand. Raise your hand.
Oh, right. That right.
Okay. All right, so it looks like 6. Those opposed? 1. All right, so it passes 6-1.
It's getting late.
Yeah. I should have just said raise your hand.
Yeah, really.
All right, so,
Can you vote twice?
yeah.
Go ahead, Larry.
Oh, yeah.
All right, what do
We
we
got the
have?
tax thing left.
All right, let's see. Yeah. Where's the tax language?
We're all done.
Are we done with all the tax language?
Yeah.
Okay.
We already did that?
Yeah.
Was that the no new tax revenue?
Oh, no, okay.
All right.
Yes. I'm not gonna make this something that we put as a charter review. We just had the state legislature pass the no new taxes. This is driven by the fact that over the last 10 years, our city's budget our revenues have doubled in the last 10 years, perhaps almost doubled in the last 10 years, and our tax rates have remained relatively the same, but the revenues, because of the property appreciation, have just jumped through the roof, as well as a lot of development out on the west side. I think we've got about $1 billion worth of development out there now, with more coming. But our revenues keep going up, and our spending always matches that, and then the citizens never get any bit of the break of the appreciation. That becomes a bigger burden. It's, as I look at it, it's taxation before you actually get to realize the value of your investment. Your stocks. Think about it. If you have a stock portfolio, I guess if you're not selling your stock, is it fair? Would you be happy if the government taxed you on the fact that your stock in GE went up 50% this year? They tax you on that, and then you have never realized any of the gain. And the next year, let's say it goes down, and their rules aren't quite as generous. They don't give you a right to the write-off. But it seems that the system is not designed to recognize and benefit the taxpayer the way it's been done. The part of the clamoring and what finally came out of the legislature was to provide some property tax relief to the citizens. And we probably owe it to council and staff to see how that plays out before we would make a recommendation to council that the citizens should be given a chance to put something, lock it in stone in the charter, that they get some benefit of the appreciation and values, that it's not just a constant paying more money to the system. So it was an issue that bothered me and bothered other people enough that they asked about it possibly being on this, but I just don't see that this is the right time until we see what happens with the new law. So
you're good with it except for the timing? So the timing is the only thing holding you back from going forward with this?
I think, yes, I think that we need to see what this new law does for the citizens, because it's designed to reduce our tax burden that has been driven generally by these skyrocketing values.
I think it's a marvelous idea. I think we should vote on it.
I don't even know where to begin in terms of the language of the problem.
Oh.
So I think at the very least, maybe we make this another recommendation to council that they investigate and look into some ways to, it's real easy. Reduce the tax rate. They did vote to reduce the tax rate 2 cents, which, I don't know what that equates to for the average homeowner, but it's based, compared to how much has gone on.
Ben probably knows.
I'm not putting Ben on the spot on this since I'm not ready to push it all the way. But I think we could put it, at least make the recommendation to this council that we think that there needs to be, they need to really focus on this and keep an eye on it, that a 2-cent tax increase or decrease, while it's appreciated, it's a movement in the right direction, is it really adequate? Given how much our tax bills have gone up. I know mine seems to have doubled. Granted, our worst enemy in terms of paying taxes is the school district. And we don't get to adjust that or address that at all. But my thought would be we make a recommendation to council. They look into ways to let the citizens reap some of the benefit of the reward, or not be the only persons being really burdened by it. So, and I know that there's some good arguments. Ben and I have talked about, not on this issue, but there are reasons that they need more money than the prior year. I mean, just salaries alone are crazy. The cost of operation, we all know that with
Inflation.
Inflation is an issue. So that is a legitimate consideration, and it's something that council really has to take into during budgets, but they should. I think that citizens need a bigger, be given more consideration in the process. So if everybody is good with that, it'll be one of the final recommendations of consideration, but not as a charter amendment. So is everybody in favor of that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll do it that way. Have we missed anything?
Review of your draft.
My draft report. Let's go to that. I have my draft report. My draft report drafted by Stacy. Thank you very much, Stacy. I did a wonderful job.
Stacy, where is that?
Page 17 in tonight's packet.
Let's see.
Of course, it'll need to be updated based on what happened tonight.
Right. So, but I don't believe do we need another meeting to deal with the final report, or?
That's up to you and the committee.
All right, well, let's go through it and then we'll decide. So, all right, so introduction, I don't think we need to really go through that. Here, city's proposed amendments, so let's just go starting on the third page of this. If somebody disagrees, let me know, but on item number 1, granting the mayor the right to vote on all matters or veto, we did not recommend that one. Number 2, authorizing payment of the stipends to the mayor and city council members. We did approve that one on a vote 8-5. C, consider moving city elections to November, odd years off the presidential elections. We did not favor that one. We rejected it 8-2. D, consider 4-year terms of city council members and staggering council terms to allow city elections to be held every other year. Again, on an 8-2 vote, we rejected that one.
Did you say 2 that we approved?
2, authorizing payment of the stipend to the mayor. We did approve that.
Because it says reject here.
Yeah, it's incorrect.
It's incorrect on that.
Oh,
We
okay,
talked about that earlier.
okay.
Which one are you looking at? No, I'm reading from
Yeah.
the actual report.
Oh, okay.
So, good catch though. Report is in the packet. It's about halfway back.
Page 17.
Page 17 of the packet. And I'm reading, I just finished reading the third page of it on page 19. And fifth one, or E, consider removing the number of days for submitting the fiscal year-end audit report. And we agreed to change the language and to remove the 180 days and have it consistent with the state law. F, review city charter and years ending in 0 and 5. Thank you, sir. Starting in 2030, we modified that language. We will continue to have it that it's at least every 5 years. And beginning in 2028, the committee will be appointed no later than July 1 of the year in which the committee is required to be appointed. So that is, we approved that revised language 7-1. G, enhancing the amount of time serving on city council to serving on boards and commissions. And we did not approve that one. It was a unanimous vote to leave it as is. H, consider drug testing for candidates running for office as well as current council members. Due to lots of probably legal issues more than anything, we rejected that one unanimously. And then amendments based on review by Pete and his team. So the first one's a power to acquire property for public purposes, city manager and the city manager living in the city limits. So we approved the language 7-2 for the eminent domain. And then on the city manager, we approved it 6-3, and effectively what we have recommended is that the council will determine the time in which the city manager needs to bring his residents to the city. And then power to tax, it's section C, and the first one is, says here that we're still considering C, but I believe we approved C. Is that right?
You approved that tonight.
Yeah, we approved that. Then the location where taxes are payable, we approved that one unanimously. Ratification section where general powers under the charter and the assessment and collection of taxes, we approved that one. I believe it was unanimously as well. Then nominations, committee voted unanimously to recommend approving the language proposed by the city attorney to update the language to be in compliance with the state. And qualified voters, we approved that one tonight. And now we have the city committee reviewing. What else do we have left?
Committee proposed.
We did talk about the recall. We did not want to change anything on the language of the recall. What about this?
You're not missing anything.
Okay. So will it go in the report that what we decided, I guess we'll go in the report how we decided about the election integrity as well as the.
Yeah, I've got the abstention of voting, 2.14, that will obviously be included with
Right.
updated language.
Did tonight,
And then the erroneous reference to 7.02, that was
done tonight.
done tonight as well. And then yes.
So there's about 12, but there's like 3 that are in one section, so that's gonna be like probably one proposition itself. So it's not gonna be, doesn't look like 12 propositions, looks like it's less than that, which is a very manageable number. And the council may add or subtract.
Is there anything else that we did, that we have not, that we addressed that we did not just go over?
I would like the recommendation to have some access to monthly financials addressed and at least dismissed.
We need to include in there that what they worked out as far as
Put it on the quarterly financial statement.
Yeah.
That's
the policy update.
Yeah, so we add the one issue where we met with the staff.
Do you want me to include language also as part of the election recommendations in this final report, or is that
Yeah.
something you're going to do?
Just.
I think it needs to be addressed as being brought forward for the committee to consider. And then what the committee did.
We'll make 3 recommendations to council to address and methods outside the charter. I
Do you want to have another meeting to go over the final report, or do you want me to email that to you? How
I
would you
think
like to
email it to us, but I think that you did a good job on this first version, that I don't know that we really need another meeting just to go over the last version of it.
And that acknowledged vote down there, that
We will,
that doesn't mean that you approve that report, but those pertain to those agreed upon propositions.
Okay.
Okay.
so what we'll send this out to everybody. When's our,
October 24th is when I
October
have you presenting to council.
okay, so I would ask you probably, and Stacy, if you would follow up. So send this out as soon as you get it, follow up twice between now and October 15th, give or take, or 1 week before council meeting, so that if there's any changes that somebody sees that need to be made, we've got time. So actually make it 10 days before.
Okay.
Follow up at least twice.
Is this
10 days
presenting
before.
at the council meeting?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So we'll have our slot, put us towards the front,
And then,
especially if it's a busy one.
and that's when Kevin and Ms. Bickham will present as well?
Is that what you'd like to do with that time?
Well, I don't think the committee can get them on there. I think that we encourage them to get on the committee, and if they do, on the agenda, if they do, I request, or the committee requests, that you put them to follow right behind us.
Or
Because
schedule another date to do that. Because that's really, it's really something different than the charter. Because I think that'd be up to the mayor and manager about when they want to schedule that.
So,
Because we did have one of those before, I think.
yeah, so guys, I would say, Kevin, if you can get it on the agenda, you get whoever gives you the blessing to do that, then I'd shoot for that. And then if you are, then it will be a good segue in. And then Stacy, if you have the ability to figure out what the sequence is, I think the council, this committee would appreciate you doing it we're doing it that way.
So David, when we're presenting to council, will you be doing that? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So we will just be, no, we'll be there, but we won't be, you'll be doing you're representing us.
I will be representing this. If I think I need help, I'll ask you for volunteers.
And let us know if,
I'm running late.
no, let us know if you plan to attend, because we might have to post notice of a possible quorum if we're going to have a majority of the committee there. And it's fine, we just need to have an idea if you're going to.
I'll ask in one of my emails to you, I'll ask who's attending, so I can get that, if you can respond, and then that way I'll know who's going to be able to attend, and if a quorum will be present.
Or is it just better to,
We can just post
assume that it will?
regardless, assuming.
I would just go ahead and assume that it will, because it's not very hard to get a quorum. 7 of us require a quorum, so I already go ahead and plan on posting the notice.
Do we need a vote tonight, Pete, to approve the draft?
Well, I think if, probably a motion to approve the draft and authorize the chair to complete the final draft. Something to that effect.
I second.
It's late, I stumbled through that.
No, I move what Pete said.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1 opposed. All right. So I didn't open that up for discussion. Kevin, is there any discussion you wanted to have?
I guess my only point to bring formal closure, I do think we need another meeting, and I do think we need a final draft, and I do think we need to walk through it one more time, but that's just my personal feeling.
Okay, so we'll have the final draft. We'll have the opportunity to review it, and
We can try to get that out sooner than later. And then if you get if we get requests that we still need to have another meeting to go over everything, We can try to
So,
schedule that in.
so rather than to avoid a walking quorum, if you've got issues with it, only respond to Stacy
Or me.
or Pete. I wouldn't even include me if there's enough discussion, they'll get me involved and we'll talk about whether we use one of the remaining dates.
Yeah, October 11th, if we needed to have a meeting, we could certainly do so. It would be our next regular
Okay.
meeting if we needed to.
Yes.
Could y'all clarify that motion just for the minutes? So are you saying you're gonna approve the final draft with giving him the authority to approve the final revised draft? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
All right. So before I go to citizen comment, I'll just open the floor for our group. If you have any comments before we go. I'll start by thanking all of y'all for your dedication and your time. And it's, this is a task and it takes away from your family life and work life. So thank you very much on behalf of the city. Thank staff so much because you guys have done a great job. Pete, thank you for putting up with us. And I know we kind of put your feet to the fire every so often. And you're probably used to that. So thank you for your time and
appreciate
effort, your team's effort.
Don't forget, we have public comment.
I'm almost there. Anybody else before we go to public comment? Anybody?
Yeah, I think we should thank our chairman and our vice
Yes.
chair.
So Stacy, Pete, I have a message from David that says he's running late. I let you know.
You got his message
like that too.
Because I had my phone off, and so I didn't get it.
I mean, his message is running late.
Stacy, I didn't have your cell phone, so I didn't text you, so.
Okay,
anyway,
I
all
knew
right.
you'd be here.
So, all right, anybody else before I?
He was very responsible, he was letting me on.
Of course.
All right, so open the floor for public comment. Do we have any citizens that would like to? All right. Going once,
Chairman, just
going twice.
a quick comment.
Name, please.
Huh?
Name and address.
Andy Olivo, N2C Olivo, 2625 Armstrong Lane, Armstrong, Texas, 75234. Cell phone number.
No.
My serial number?
No.
No, just your bank account.
Yeah, bank account.
I gave it David's account. No, I just want to say thank you for letting me be in here. And I apologize if sometimes I was too much of an asshole. I didn't mean to do that, but to me it is very serious. And to some extent, I don't trust, like politicians, like the mayor and people like that, not personally, but because sometimes they say something and then something else happens. And so I think we have to be aware of that. Like, I know he made those 3 points about he was not for this, and I hope the record is preserved. I like that it's preserved because if something happens, people want to say, you said you were not for this. So anyway, the point is this, is that, the main, I did not see any real issue that would require an election at all. At all. I mean, and if there is, there's no more than about maybe 5 items. But I would hope that the city council would talk to Pete and stuff like that, because sometimes they just proceed. You've seen city council do that. They just proceed and do something in spite of everything, in spite of what citizens want or don't want. They proceed and do it anyway. And so sometimes city councils don't think they think a right to proceed, and they don't realize that what they're doing sometimes creating problems, especially if something is filed. Then who pays for that? They don't pay for that. We citizens pay for that. I mean, we pay for a dispute. For example, if somehow we have this election dispute that we have about running elections properly, almost every place I've been, there's always been a question about, okay, these elections are not done right. So 2, 3 citizens complaining all the time. They have to do is A, B, C, D. But what you can do is what I've seen in the past, like I was in Gallatin City Council many years. And what they did is that you call the Dallas County Election Board and have come somebody and give a presentation, tell you why they can do certain things and why they cannot. And then, like the chairman was saying, if we like that, but we have a bunch of cities that we do this for, and you're just one of them. So if you want to do your own election, great, but you're gonna have to pay for that. And of course, the citizens, we pay for that, not the city council, in the way they do too, but we pay for that. So I just want to be certain that when when the report goes to the city council, and if you don't see that, you don't like something, you speak up. But, the worst thing you can do is have an election, and then, spend all that money and so forth, and then it's, people vote against it. So I know right now, you said about citizens' opinion. Yeah, the majority of opinions, people are not here. Only like 20-some hundred voted in the election, I believe, about 35,000. The majority of people are not here, but you represent them, which is great. So I think it's great. I've heard some of your comments. I know most of you, and I know you're good people. So I thank you for that time. But I also hope that City Council respects your opinion. If you don't like something, you speak up. And also I hope that they listen to the city attorney and listen for the tell them if something goes wrong during this process for elections and stuff like that, that he will tell them, wait a minute, think about this before you spend that money. It's not your money, it's the citizens' money that you're spending. So anyway, thank you very much. I apologize if I said too much and if I insulted anybody. I didn't mean to do that. I just don't want to bring more taxes like all of you.
You insulted politicians, but you insulted yourself because you were yourself were like.
Well, you're a former politician, so you're insulted too.
Yeah, no, I just.
I like an asshole. I understand.
No, you're not. You're not.
That was like, you know what I'm saying?
If you were beyond the pale, I would have called you out and asked you to stop. I
Thank you for coming every week.
So, yes, I appreciate everybody that did show up, and I appreciate anybody that watches this on TV at some point in time. It's such a stimulating process.
So it'll be late night TV for
Yeah,
sure.
late night.
A
TV,
cure
so-
for insomnia.
So, anyway, all right, so, just last call for a vote or a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Any have second?
Second.
Anybody opposed to adjourning? All right, anybody in favor of adjourning? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
All right, congratulations.
Thanks for all your help.
No, thank you. Good comments.
Thanks, Andy.
Is your forward?
No, thank you.
Good job, Andy.